I'm Jason Hager, and this is Grayleaf Media, now presented as marketing notes for entrepreneurs, where impact-driven leaders use trust, clarity, and strategy to turn good work into sustainable growth. This is the Trust Wall series, an ongoing look at what trust is made of, how it breaks, and why strong brands build it deliberately. Building something that lasts costs more than most people think. More time, more money, more patience, more sacrifice. And most people quit when they realize the actual price. Here's a question nobody wants to answer honestly. Are you willing to pay what it costs? Not can you afford it. Not do you want the result. Are you actually willing to pay the cost to build something solid? You probably think you already know the answer. Of course I am. I'm working hard. I'm committed. I'm all in. But that's not what I'm asking. Everyone says they want something durable, until durability starts making demands. Because here's what I've noticed. Everyone wants a business that works, a structure that stands, a brand that lasts, something they can build on for years. But when they find out what it actually costs, not just in money, but in time, attention, patience, delayed gratification, saying no to other things, many people realize they're not willing to pay it. And that's okay. I'm not here to judge, but I am here to be honest with you about what building something solid actually requires. The worst thing you can do is start building without understanding the cost. You'll run out of resources halfway through. You'll compromise on things you shouldn't. You'll cut corners that create structural problems. Or you'll just quit when it gets harder than you expected. Over the past few episodes, we've talked about foundations, materials, blueprints, and what's load-bearing versus decorative. But none of that matters if you're not willing to pay what it costs to build it right. So today we're talking about cost. Not just money. The full cost. This is Episode 8, Trust Walls Part 7, The Cost. Today we're looking at what it actually takes to build something that lasts, why people underestimate it, and how to decide if you're willing to pay the price. Because if you can't count the cost honestly, you can't build strategically. Let's start with what building actually costs. Not the obvious stuff like money and time, but the costs people don't see coming. First, the cost of patience. Building solid structures takes longer than you think. Your foundation needs time to cure. Your mortar needs time to set. Your systems need time to prove themselves. Your team needs time to mature. You can't rush this. You can throw more money at it, but that doesn't speed up the curing process. Some things just take time. And here's what kills most people. While you're being patient, building slowly, doing foundation work that nobody sees, your competitors are moving fast. They're launching. They're getting traction. They're posting about growth. And you're still digging. The cost of patience is enduring the gap between when you start and when anyone can see what you're building. It's working on things that don't show up on Instagram. It's explaining to people why you're not moving faster. It's believing in the process when the results aren't visible yet. Many people aren't willing to pay that cost. So they rush. They skip the foundation. They start building before they're ready. And they end up with structures that look impressive but can't bear weight. Second, the cost of focus. Building something solid requires saying no to almost everything else. You can't build in every direction at once. You can't chase every opportunity. You can't serve every customer. You can't pursue every interesting idea. The cost of focus is opportunity cost. It's watching other people do things you can't, because you're committed to your structure. It's turning down revenue because it doesn't align with your blueprint. It's saying no to partnerships, features, markets, and strategies that might work, but would distract from what you're building. This is incredibly hard, especially when you're early and revenue is tight and you need cash and someone offers you a project that doesn't quite fit but pays well. The temptation is to take it, to compromise, to tell yourself, just this once. But every compromise weakens the structure. Every deviation from the blueprint creates complexity. Every yes to the wrong thing is a no to the right thing. Third, the cost of consistency. Building solid requires showing up every day, even when it's not exciting. Laying brick 437 is no different than laying brick 3. It's just as important, but it's not novel. It's not interesting. It doesn't feel like progress, because you've done it 436 times already. The cost of consistency is the grind, the repetition, the boring, unsexy work of doing the same things over and over, because that's what builds structure. Your 100th sales conversation, your 50th client delivery, your 200th piece of content, your 1000th email. People underestimate this cost because they think it gets easier. It doesn't. It gets more tedious. The excitement fades. The novelty is gone. You're just laying bricks. Sometimes the cost is continuing to believe in work that has not yet given you visible proof. And that's when many people quit. Not because it's too hard, because it feels repetitive and still too early to prove anything. These three costs, patience, focus, consistency, they're not dramatic. They don't make good stories. But they are what separate people who build solid structures from people who just stack bricks until they get distracted. So why do people consistently underestimate what it costs to build something solid? First, nobody photographs excavation. They photograph ribbon cuttings. They only see finished structures. When you look at a successful business, you see the building. You don't see the years of foundation work. You don't see the patience, the focus, the grinding consistency. You just see the result. So you assume it didn't cost that much, or that it happened faster, or that they got lucky. And you think, I can do that. I can build something like that. But you're comparing your beginning to their middle, your foundation work to their finished structure. Second, they confuse activity with progress. They think, I'm working hard, so I must be making progress. They assume effort automatically means progress. But working hard on decorative elements doesn't build structure. Working hard in the wrong direction doesn't get you closer. Working hard without a blueprint just creates a pile of disconnected bricks. The cost isn't just effort. It's directed effort, strategic effort, patient, focused, consistent effort on the right things. Third, they don't factor in the learning curve. Learning to lay bricks well takes time. Your first 100 bricks are going to be rough. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to redo work. You're going to waste materials. That's all part of the cost. But people don't budget for it. They think they'll be good immediately, that their first attempt will be their best attempt. So when reality hits, when things take longer, cost more, require more skill than they expected, they feel discouraged, behind, like they're failing. They're not failing. They're just learning to build. But they didn't count that cost. Fourth, they underestimate compound problems. One bad brick might not collapse the structure, but if you keep laying bad bricks, the problems compound. One compromise doesn't kill the business, but if you keep compromising, the structural integrity degrades until a small problem creates catastrophic failure. The cost of fixing compound problems is exponentially higher than the cost of building right the first time. But people don't see that until it's too late. There's a hidden cost of building cheap. Let's talk about what happens when you try to avoid the cost. When you look for shortcuts, cut corners, or build with cheaper materials because you don't want to pay the full price. You pay twice. First, you pay for the cheap version. Then you pay for it again to fix it, replace it, or rebuild it properly. A public example of this is WeWork. From the outside, it looked unstoppable. Beautiful spaces, massive growth, huge funding, enormous attention. But underneath that, the economics were fragile. The brand grew faster than the business model could support. Eventually, the structure couldn't carry the weight it was trying to hold. Most businesses don't fail that publicly, but the pattern is common. A founder launches before delivery is repeatable. Sales come in, but every new client creates manual strain. Revenue rises, but so does internal friction. What looks like growth starts becoming operational debt. You skip foundation work because it feels slow. You launch before pricing is tested, before delivery is stable, before you know whether the offer really holds. You save time up front, but later you have to pivot, rebuild, or start over. You paid once to get moving. Now you're paying again to correct what should have been stronger from the start. Sometimes that happens early. Sometimes the weakness shows up later. Or you build with cheap bricks because premium bricks are expensive. You cut corners on delivery. You hire the cheapest talent. You use the lowest cost tools. You scrimp on systems. It works at first, but as you scale, the cheap materials start failing. Customer complaints increase. Employee turnover spikes. Systems break. Quality degrades. Now you have to rebuild while the business is running, which is exponentially harder and more expensive than building right initially. The hidden cost of building cheap is that you pay the full price eventually, plus the cost of the time you lost, the momentum you destroyed, and the trust you damaged by shipping something that wasn't ready. I see this constantly with bootstrapped businesses. People delaying the parts that actually carry weight because cash is tight and the cheaper option feels easier. But delayed cost is still cost. It just arrives later, usually with more pressure attached. There's a difference between being resourceful and being cheap. Resourceful means you find creative ways to build within your constraints. Cheap means you compromise on things that matter because you don't want to pay. Resourceful is strategic. Cheap is short-sighted. And the cost of cheap is always higher than the cost of right. Are you willing? So how do you actually decide if you're willing to pay what it costs? Here are the questions you need to answer honestly. Question 1. What am I actually building? Not what you hope it becomes. What are you building right now? Because the cost depends on the scale. A garden shed costs less than a house. A house costs less than a skyscraper. If you're building something modest, the cost is manageable. If you're building something ambitious, the cost is significant. Question 2. What's my timeline? Are you willing to spend 3 years on foundation and structure before anyone sees results? Or do you need revenue in 6 months? Both are valid, but they require different approaches. If you need fast revenue, some parts of the structure must go live before others are complete, but you still need to know which compromises are temporary and which ones become dangerous. Fast decisions are not the problem. Blind trade-offs are. Speed is manageable. Hidden weakness is not. Question 3. What am I willing to sacrifice? Building something solid means saying no to other things. What are you actually willing to give up? Flexibility? Speed? Other opportunities? Immediate income? Certain markets? Specific features? Question 4. Can I sustain this pace? Building isn't a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's showing up every day for years. Can you maintain focus, patience, and consistency for that long? Or will you burn out, get bored, or get distracted? Question 5. What happens if I don't build this? Sometimes the cost of not building is higher than the cost of building. If you don't build this structure, what's the alternative? Where will you be in 5 years if you don't start now? These aren't comfortable questions, but they're honest questions. And if you can't answer them, you're not ready to build. Count the cost before you start. Here's what I want you to understand. Counting the cost isn't discouraging. It's strategic. If you know what it costs up front, you can plan for it. You can budget for it. You can pace yourself. You can set realistic expectations with yourself, your team, your family, your investors. But if you don't count the cost, you'll start building and then run out of resources halfway through. And that's when things get desperate. That's when you start compromising. That's when structural problems emerge. Strong builders do not confuse delay with failure. They understand that unfinished does not mean unsound. They're the ones who counted the cost, decided that they were willing to pay it, and then followed through. They didn't quit when it got hard. They didn't cut corners when it got expensive. They didn't rush when it got slow. They just kept building, brick by brick, day by day, because they knew the cost from the beginning. So here's what I want you to do this week. Count the cost. What will it actually take to build what you're trying to build? Not just money, time, attention, patience, focus, consistency, sacrifice. Are you willing to pay that price? Not can you, but will you? Because if you're not willing, that's okay. Build something proportionate to what you can sustain. Something that matches what you're actually willing to invest. But don't start building something solid if you're not willing to pay what it costs. Because you'll either compromise the structure or you'll quit halfway through. The cost is high, but the alternative, building something weak or not building at all, costs more in the long run. I'm Jason Hager, and this is Marketing Notes for Entrepreneurs from Grayleaf Media, for leaders who believe profit and purpose don't have to be at odds. Sometimes the hardest part is not paying the cost. It's knowing what is worth paying for in the first place. If you need help understanding what your structure actually requires, that's what brand therapy is for. We help you count the cost honestly and build something you can sustain. Link in the description. Next time, we're starting something new. The Trust Wall series showed you how to build a solid structure. Now we're going to talk about making sure you're building for the right people. Because it doesn't matter how solid your foundation is if you're building in the wrong direction. Until then, keep building and count the cost.